A nurse was hired to care for a comatose Arab millionaire, but what she discovered in his room could destroy his entire empire and her life forever. 98% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. It's absolutely free, and it helps us create more real-life stories like this. By subscribing, you're supporting us to bring you even more jaw-dropping content. Don't miss out on the next twist. Hit that subscribe button now. A nurse was hired to care for an Arab millionaire, a man who had everything: money, power, respect. But what she didn't know was, his life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. This wasn't just any millionaire. No, this was a man who had everything, but was now lying motionless, unable to move or speak. A victim of a tragic accident, or so everyone believed. But what if I told you this coma wasn't the only thing keeping him from the world? What if I told you that in the silence of his room, a dangerous secret lay hidden, one that could shatter his entire legacy? You see, things aren't always what they seem, and sometimes the truth is darker than you could ever imagine. Imagine being the one who uncovers it. What would you do? Would you walk away, or would you dig deeper into the mystery of the man who seemed invincible? Trust me, this isn't just another boring hospital story. This is where everything changes. Every day she did the same thing. Woke up early, went to his room, checked his vitals, cleaned his room, and made sure he was comfortable. The routine was simple, almost mechanical. She was just another caretaker in a long list of people who had been hired to take care of him. But as the days passed, something began to nag at her. There was something about this man, something off. He wasn't just some random rich guy. His name was on the tip of everyone's tongue. His wealth was legendary, and yet here he was, completely vulnerable, helpless. What did he know? What had he done to end up like this? And why had no one told her anything about his past? One morning as she was tidying up his room, she noticed something strange, a small unmarked envelope tucked beneath the bed. At first she thought it was just a misplaced letter, but something about it felt wrong. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the envelope as if it were a trap. Curiosity got the best of her, and she carefully opened it. Inside there was nothing but a single sheet of paper, but the words on it were enough to make her blood run cold. It wasn't just a letter, it was a clue that pointed to a secret buried deep beneath the surface of this millionaire's perfect life, a secret that no one had ever dared to talk about. And from that moment on, everything changed. She couldn't just pretend she didn't know. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong. But the more she dug, the more dangerous things became. She began to realize that the millionaire's empire wasn't built on hard work and luck. No, it was built on something far more sinister. She started to uncover connections, names, and places she never should have known. And now, with each new discovery, the stakes were rising, and there was no turning back. What had she stumbled upon? And more importantly, who would stop her from uncovering the truth? The deeper she went, the more unsettling the pieces of the puzzle became. She couldn't stop herself. Each discovery, no matter how small, made her realize that what she had uncovered wasn't just a secret. It was a ticking time bomb. She found herself standing in the millionaire's grand mansion, once so pristine and inviting, now feeling more like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on her with every step, the weight of the truth bearing down on her. The more she examined the documents she had found, the more connections she started to see. Names from foreign countries, businesses in remote locations, and strange coded messages that didn't make any sense at first. But soon everything started to fall into place. This wasn't just a man with a fortune. He was part of something far bigger, something illegal, something dangerous, the kind of thing that could destroy the lives of anyone caught in its web. Her mind raced. How could she have missed this? How had no one else figured it out? Was she really the first person to stumble upon this hidden world? Or was she just another pawn in a much larger game? And then, things got worse. The moment she tried to dig even deeper, she felt the shift. It was subtle at first, a strange look from one of the millionaire's trusted staff members, a cryptic message from an unknown number on her phone, a shadow lurking just outside the window. Whoever was running the show behind the scenes didn't want this secret to come out. and they were willing to do anything to keep it buried. The nurse started to feel eyes on her constantly. She began to doubt everyone around her. Was the millionaire's wife involved? Or his closest business partner? Could anyone she trusted be a part of this hidden world of crime? It wasn't long before she realized just how far-reaching this empire really was. The more she uncovered, the more danger she was in. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. She couldn't even trust her own judgment anymore. The millionaire, lying helplessly in his bed, seemed to be the key to unlocking the entire operation. But would anyone believe her if she exposed it? Would anyone take her seriously? Or would she just be another voice lost in the chaos? As the days passed, the nurse became obsessed, driven by the need for answers. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on her, and every new discovery made her question her own sanity. Was she going too far? Was she getting in over her head? And just when she thought she couldn't go any further, she found the final piece of the puzzle. The truth, so shocking, so powerful, that it could bring down everything. His fortune, his empire, and even the lives of those closest to him. But revealing it would come at a cost. The question was she willing to pay it? The nurse could feel the walls closing in around her. The mansion that once seemed like a sanctuary now felt more like a prison. Every time she walked down the long corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, waiting for her to slip up. It was as if the house itself was alive, and it knew her every move. But she couldn't stop. The deeper she went, the more obsessed she became with uncovering the truth. She knew she was on the edge of something massive, something so powerful it could change the course of her life forever. And then, one night, it happened. While she was sitting alone in the millionaire's office, flipping through his personal files, she found it. A name that wasn't in any of the public records. It was a name connected to a series of businesses, some legitimate, but most were, well, not so much. This was the name of someone who had been linked to organized crime, to money laundering, and to a series of shady deals that no one could ever trace back. Her hands trembled as she stared at the name. Could it be? Was the millionaire not just a victim of fate, but an active participant in something far darker? As she processed this revelation, a sudden, chilling thought crossed her mind. What if the coma wasn't an accident? What if the millionaire had staged his own downfall to escape something even more dangerous? She couldn't help but think back to the night of the accident. The night everything had changed. The accident that had left him unable to speak, to move, to defend himself. It had seemed so random, so tragic, but now it felt like the perfect cover-up. He had become a puppet, trapped in his own body, unable to stop anyone from taking advantage of his fortune and secrets. Was it possible he'd been set up, silenced, left to fade into the background as those around him profited from his empire? But there was something else. The deeper she went, the more she realized that the millionaire wasn't just surrounded by criminals. He was tied to powerful people, politicians, businessmen, even members of his own family. People who would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. This was no longer just a secret, it was a war. And then she began receiving messages. At first they were subtle, strange phone calls with nothing but silence on the other end, a note left on her desk saying, "Stop now or regret it." But then the messages grew bolder. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she was getting too close, and she knew exactly who they were. But she also knew something else. If she didn't go through with this, if she backed off now, the truth would be lost forever. The millionaire's empire would continue, untouched, unchallenged. The people behind the scenes would get away with everything, and she would just be another footnote in a story no one would ever tell. So she pushed on, even though every step felt like she was walking into the unknown. Every new piece of the puzzle she uncovered made her question whether she was doing the right thing, or if she was playing into the hands of those who wanted her to uncover this truth in the first place. The deeper she went, the more the danger escalated. She knew she was being followed, but she couldn't stop herself. The truth was out there, and it was waiting for her to expose it. It was waiting for someone brave enough to step into the darkness, to risk everything in the name of justice. And then it happened. One night, after another long day of investigating, she received a call. The voice on the other end was familiar, but cold. It was someone she thought she could trust. But the words they spoke shook her to her core. You don't know who you're dealing with. It was a warning, a final warning. The nurse's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of what she had uncovered came crashing down on her. The final piece of the puzzle was in her hands, but now she understood just how high the stakes were. She wasn't just up against a criminal empire. She was up against the very people who controlled everything, and they weren't going to let her walk away. Now, with the truth in her grasp, the nurse had to make a choice: expose the scandal that could ruin everything, or walk away and let the millionaire's dark empire continue its reign. The nurse's mind was spinning. She knew the truth now, and it was more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. What she had uncovered was bigger than just one man's fall from grace. It was an empire built on lies, betrayal, and power that reached all corners of the world. And she had the key to destroy it all. But the cost? It was higher than she could have ever prepared for. She sat alone in the office, the documents scattered across the desk like pieces of a broken puzzle. Her hands shook as she went through them one more time, double-checking everything. The names, the dates, the transactions, everything pointed back to one undeniable fact. The millionaire hadn't been a victim. He had been the mastermind. He had been playing everyone, including her. She couldn't believe it. The man who had appeared so vulnerable, so innocent in his coma, was the architect of a multi-million-dollar criminal network. The lavish mansion, the pristine life, it had all been a facade. And now she knew what she had to do. But as soon as she made the decision, the fear set in. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. The phone calls had been a warning, but now she could feel the pressure building. Every shadow in the hallway, every creak of the floorboards, every glance from the staff felt like a threat. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a target. And then the final blow hit. A figure in a dark suit appeared at her door, a familiar face that she never thought would be involved. Someone from the millionaire's inner circle. This person didn't need to say a word. The look in their eyes told her everything she needed to know. They had been watching her the entire time, waiting for her to make a move. The figure didn't speak, but their presence was enough to make her heart race. "You're getting too close," they said finally, their voice low and menacing. "This is bigger than you. You're in over your head." She couldn't back down now. She knew too much. The truth was out, and it was going to destroy everything. But what would happen to her if she exposed it? Would she be able to live with the consequences of taking down a man who had more power than she could fathom? The clock was ticking, and she realized that every second she waited made her more vulnerable. The decision was clear, but the cost of uncovering the truth might be far more than she was ready to pay. The nurse now stood at the edge of a precipice, staring down into the abyss of a criminal empire so vast and powerful that it could swallow her whole. And she had to decide: expose the man who had everything and risk everything in return, or walk away, leaving behind a trail of destruction and regret. But as she made her way to the millionaire's bedside, where he lay motionless, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. The man who had once been a helpless invalid was slowly, almost imperceptibly, moving. Was he awake? Was this the moment she had been waiting for? Or was this just another trap? She didn't know, but she couldn't stop herself from moving closer. Everything was about to change. The game was no longer just about secrets and lies. It was about survival. And in this dangerous world, no one was safe. Her breath caught in her throat as she leaned in closer to the millionaire's bed. The faintest twitch of his finger, barely noticeable, sent a chill down her spine. For weeks, she had been caring for a man she believed was completely unaware of his surroundings. A man who could do nothing but lie there, trapped inside his own body. But now it seemed like he was waking up, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. The nurse stepped back in shock. Was he faking it all along? Had he been conscious, watching her every move, knowing exactly what she was doing? Before she could process what was happening, the door to the room creaked open. She spun around, heart racing, to find the figure in the dark suit standing in the doorway once more. This time, there was no mistaking the intent in their eyes. They weren't here to warn her. They were here to stop her. You should have left well enough alone, the figure said, their voice cold, calculated. But now, you've crossed a line, and there's no going back. The nurse's mind raced. She had thought she was in control. She had thought she could outsmart them, expose the truth, and walk away. But this was different. The man who had seemed like nothing more than a helpless victim was now a part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. He's been watching you this whole time, the figure continued, stepping into the room, their footsteps echoing ominously. All of this, the coma, the secrecy, the lies, it's all been part of his plan. You're not the first person to think they could expose him, and you won't be the last. Her heart pounded in her chest. The truth she had uncovered was more than she could have ever imagined. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. The millionaire had manipulated everyone around him, including her. She had been playing right into his hands without even realizing it. You think you're the hero in this story, but you're just another pawn, the figure sneered. You've already made your choice by uncovering the truth. But now, you need to make another choice, whether you want to live with the consequences. The nurse's blood ran cold. It was clear now that she had been caught in a trap, one she couldn't escape. The walls were closing in on her, and the truth, as much as it burned in her hands, had only made things worse. There was no safe way out anymore. With each passing second, the room seemed to grow smaller, the air thicker. She glanced back at the millionaire, lying motionless once more. Was he really asleep? Or was he playing her just like everyone else? She didn't know anymore. But she couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything she had uncovered. She was too deep into this, and if she didn't expose it, everything she had fought for would be in vain. You want to expose the truth? The figure taunted. Go ahead, but remember, you're not the only one with secrets. Everyone has something to hide. And with those words, the nurse realized this wasn't just a battle for the truth. It was a battle for her life. The game had changed, and now she was the one being hunted. But in the darkest corners of her mind, a question lingered. Could she trust herself anymore? Or had she become just another pawn in a much larger game? Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, the room feeling colder than ever before. The figure in the dark suit was moving closer, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The nurse couldn't tear her eyes away from the motionless figure on the bed, the millionaire, who seemed so helpless, so weak, and yet the feeling that something more was lurking beneath the surface wouldn't leave her. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling. The man she had cared for, the man she had spent so many hours nursing, was not the innocent soul she'd believed him to be. She had been so focused on his vulnerability, so convinced that his coma was the key to his tragic fate, that she had failed to see the truth that was right in front of her. And now, as the figure in the suit closed in, she realized just how much danger she was truly in. You really thought you could just waltz in here and expose him, didn't you? The voice of the figure was laced with mockery, but there was no humor in it, just cold, calculating menace. You think you're the hero in this twisted story, but you're just another casualty in a game you can't even begin to understand. The nurse felt her knees go weak as the weight of those words hit her. She had spent so much time piecing together the secrets of this mansion, the dark underworld the millionaire was hiding behind that perfect facade. But now, standing in front of the real forces that controlled everything, she realized how naive she had been. She was up against more than just a man in a coma. She was up against an empire. And no one ever escaped the grasp of such power. What are you going to do? She managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The air around her seemed to grow thick with tension. The figure smirked, but their eyes told a different story, one of danger, of warning. You think you have a choice? The figure asked, stepping closer until they were almost nose to nose with her. You've already made your choice, by investigating him, by poking your nose where it doesn't belong, and now you're a part of this, whether you like it or not. The nurse felt her throat tighten, and for the first time since this all began, doubt crept into her mind. Was she really in too deep? Was there any way out of this? She thought she could expose the truth, End the reign of a man whose wealth and power had been built on lies, but now she wasn't sure anymore. You don't get it, do you? The figure continued. This man, this so-called helpless millionaire, isn't the victim you think he is. He's the one who's been pulling the strings all along. He's the puppet master, and you're just another piece in his game. He made you think you were helping him, but all you were doing was playing into his hands. The nurse staggered back, her mind spinning. She had thought she had uncovered the truth. But now as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, she realized that what she thought was true was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. Everything had been a trap, designed to pull her in, to make her do exactly what he wanted. You've got it all wrong, she said, her voice trembling. He's in a coma. He can't be controlling anything. The figure chuckled darkly. You really don't understand, do you? His condition, his helplessness, it's all a front, a carefully crafted facade. He's been playing everyone, his family, his friends, even you. And you know what? You've just played right into his hands. For a moment, the nurse felt her world shatter. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. The man she had cared for so diligently, the man who had been her responsibility for all this time, wasn't just another wealthy, broken soul. He was someone far more dangerous, someone who had manipulated everyone around him to cover up his true intentions. But there was no turning back now. She had come too far to back down. She wasn't going to be silenced. Not now, not after everything she had uncovered. But that was easier said than done. Before she could process what was happening, the lights in the room flickered. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with unspoken threats and unsaid truths. The millionaire, still lying motionless on the bed, seemed to be watching her. Was he really awake? Had he been conscious this whole time, pretending to be a prisoner in his own body while everyone around him made moves on his behalf? The nurse felt a sickening realization settling in. She had been fooled. She had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. The figure in the suit seemed to sense her turmoil, their face hardening as they took another step forward. You want to know the truth, don't you? Well, here it is. Your little investigation, your digging, has uncovered something far more dangerous than you could ever imagine. And now you're part of the story. You're caught in a trap, and there's no way out. The nurse opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was trapped, caught between her own desire for the truth and the very real threat of the people who would stop at nothing to keep it buried. You think you can expose him? The figure sneered, their voice dripping with contempt. You're too late. Everything you've discovered, everything you think you know, it's all been part of his plan. He's been watching you every step of the way, and now that you've crossed the line, you're a liability. You're expendable. Her mind raced. What had she gotten herself into? She had thought she could change everything, take down a corrupt empire, and expose a millionaire's darkest secrets. But now she saw the full scope of the danger. She was just another pawn in a game she couldn't hope to understand. In the corner of her eye, she saw the millionaire's hand twitch again, just slightly. Her breath hitched. Was he really waking up, or was this just another trick? Was he finally going to show his true face? But before she could act, the figure in the suit reached for their phone. The cold, metallic click of the device snapping open echoed in the silence of the room. You think you're the first person to try and take him down? The figure asked, their voice low and dangerous. You won't be the last, but you will be the first to fail. Her blood ran cold as they dialed a number, speaking into the phone with an icy calm. We have a problem. The nurse is getting too close. Handle it. The nurse felt her knees weaken, but she wasn't going to go down without a fight. She wasn't just going to let them destroy everything she had uncovered. She wasn't going to let them win. But as the figure in the suit hung up the phone, they turned to her with a smile, a cold, calculating smile that sent a shiver down her spine. It's over, they said. You've already lost. And just like that, the world she had known, everything she thought was true, began to unravel before her eyes. She had uncovered the secret. She had exposed the truth. But now the real game was just beginning. And in this world, there were no winners. The walls felt like they were closing in. The nurse could hear her heart pounding in her ears, each beat louder than the last. The figure in the dark suit had given her a taste of the truth, but now it seemed like the price for that knowledge was her life. The web she had stumbled into was far more complex than she could have ever imagined. The stakes were higher, the consequences darker. With every passing second, she felt the weight of her situation pressing down on her chest. She was no longer just the nurse in a hospital room. She was now a player in a high-stakes game of power, lies, and deceit. The figure in front of her, cold, emotionless, was a reminder that she wasn't in control anymore. The millionaire wasn't just a victim. He was the mastermind, and she was the one being hunted. The phone call had sealed her fate. She could hear the muffled voices on the other end, a plan being set in motion. What had started as an innocent investigation into a wealthy man's fall from grace had turned into a deadly game of survival. No one was who they appeared to be. The line between truth and deception was so thin, it was almost impossible to see. "You've been warned," the figure said, his voice cold and final. "Now there's no turning back. Your choices have led you here. You've crossed the line, and now it's time to pay the price." The nurse swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. She didn't know how much longer she could keep up the act. Everything was spiraling out of control, faster than she could process. She was too deep now, and there was no way to escape. She turned to the millionaire's bed, her gaze fixed on his motionless body. Was he really asleep? Was he playing everyone, including her? The thought haunted her, but there was no time to dwell on that now. The figure in the suit was closing in, and with each step they took, the nurse's chance for survival seemed to slip further away. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing sound broke the tension. A phone buzzing, vibrating across the table. She looked down at it, her pulse quickening. The message on the screen was simple, but it hit her like a ton of bricks. "We know everything. Don't even think about exposing the truth. You're already in too deep." The nurse's blood ran cold as she realized the extent of the web she was trapped in. She had been watched, followed, every move carefully calculated. The millionaire's empire was far-reaching, and it was now coming for her. But just as the figure in the suit stepped closer, a voice interrupted the silence. "Stop!" The voice was faint but unmistakable. It came from the millionaire's bed. The nurse's eyes widened in disbelief as the man she thought was unconscious for so long finally spoke. His voice was weak, raspy, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. "You've made a grave mistake," he said, his eyes flickering open. "All of you." The nurse couldn't believe it. Was he awake? Had he been listening this whole time? Her thoughts raced, confusion and shock clouding her mind. The figure in the suit stepped back, a look of surprise crossing their face. They hadn't expected this. "You should have stayed asleep," the figure muttered under their breath, tension rising in the room. The millionaire smiled weakly, his voice hoarse but determined. "It's too late for all of you. You've played your parts, but now it's my turn." For a brief moment, there was silence. And then, chaos erupted. The nurse watched in shock as the millionaire's eyes glinted with something dangerous, something she hadn't seen before. His hands, once limp and lifeless, twitched with life. But as the tension reached its peak, the figure in the suit suddenly reached for a weapon, a flash of cold steel. The nurse didn't hesitate. She had to act fast. In a split second, the room erupted into chaos. There were sounds of footsteps, shouts, and the clinking of metal. The nurse tried to make a run for the door, but the figure in the suit was too quick. They grabbed her by the arm, spinning her around. "You really think you can escape now?" the figure sneered. "This is just the beginning. We own you. You can't run from this." But as they spoke, the millionaire's voice cut through the chaos once more. "You don't own anything anymore. The game has changed." With one final burst of energy, the nurse broke free from the figure's grip, her heart racing. She had to get out. She had to expose everything. The truth needed to come out. As she bolted out the door, she heard the millionaire's voice echoing behind her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The nurse didn't know what awaited her, but one thing was clear. The truth had a price, and she had paid it. But now she was determined to make sure that the world knew what she knew. The game was on. The truth was out there, and she was going to expose it, no matter the cost. The question was, would anyone believe her? And even if they did, would it be enough to stop the empire she had uncovered? As she disappeared into the night, the only thing on her mind was one word: survival. She was no longer just fighting for the truth. She was fighting to stay alive. But before we find out how this story ends, did you enjoy this twist-filled journey of deceit, power, and survival? If you want to hear more shocking stories, real-life revelations, and gripping plots that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. Did you know that 98% of people who watch don't subscribe? It's completely free, and it helps us create more real-life stories like this one. So what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe now and join our growing community. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this saga. You don't want to miss it. Subscribe now. It's free and keeps you informed about the most captivating stories out there.